Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead, where the summer garden has officially come to an end. To celebrate that, we're going to be harvesting the sweet potatoes today. One thing that I like to do first before I harvest the sweet potatoes is remove the greens from the area. You can absolutely eat these greens, so harvest them and put them in the freezer if you choose to do so. But what I'm going to choose to do today is actually feed those to my pigs. Immediately upon removing the greens, I started to notice that there may be some issues with this bed. It looks like we've had some rodents tunneling in this bed for quite some time, and unfortunately it looks like they've gotten to most of the sweet potatoes. Now, I've only dug up this little corner here as of right now, but I'm a little bit nervous about what's in the rest of this bed. So right now I'm making two piles that have been ravaged by rodents and piles that have not. Good. I was getting a little worried, but looks like we do have some really good sweet potatoes. Look at that. Wow, oh, a little bit of damage. So what I'm gonna do is actually keep this, let that spot heal over, and the rest of the potatoes should be fine.
Pulled out roots. Do potatoes grow roots?
Yeah. Do you need help? Do you need help or do you want to do it?
Is it okay if I step in?
Yeah, that's okay.
So I can't get it. Oh, that is a good one. It's really funny.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's heavy.
There's probably more down in that same hole.
It's really big.
Oh, it's good and heavy. So this is what we wound up with, which honestly isn't that much less than I have harvested in previous years. I did hope for and honestly expect a little bit more, but when you've got a rodent infestation in a bed, sometimes you just get what you can out of it. I actually was not aware that the rodents were in this bed at all, partially because of the greens covering the bed. And the greens were great. They provided a sort of mulch to the area, but they also did provide a way for the rodents to hide their tunnels. I had no idea that they were there, but we got a pretty good harvest anyway. What I'm going to do is actually place these under our carport on top of basically some fencing that I have so they can get good circulation and so the skins can cure. Right now they're really soft and tender, and we can eat them right now if we needed to or if we wanted to. But they're gonna last a lot better long term if I let the skins cure and harden up just a little bit. Side note too, and you can probably notice, I did plant a couple different varieties of sweet potato, and it looks like the one that survived the rodents best was the purple sweet potato. And this reminds me of something I wanted to tell you guys earlier, or suggest to you guys. Right now is a really good time to watch everybody's garden tours, everybody's end of year harvest, to kind of determine and plan for what you want to plant next year. So look at people in your similar growing zone and see what works for them and see what maybe seeds you want to purchase. Right now is a really awesome time of year to purchase seed. A lot of seed companies have sales on the seed that they didn't sell out of this year, and you can get a lot of really good deals. That's what I like to do. Fall time is my favorite time to buy seeds. Now, sweet potatoes, you don't plant from seed. These are either from whole potatoes or from slips, but I can definitely plan to hold back some purple sweet potatoes for slips for the garden for next year. I'm actually surprised we got any melons out of the melon bed today. Right now the melons are kind of on their last hurrah. They're starting to mature their fruits a lot smaller than they normally will. A lot of times you can tell that a plant is on its way out when it starts doing this. You usually get nice big healthy fruit, but right now you're getting really small ones that are maturing really fast. The plant is just trying its best to mature the seed inside and ensure that the genetics get passed on. So in the tomato tunnel here, really the only plants that are still green are the melons and the cucamelons, which I don't think are technically a melon, but I might be wrong. See cucamelons right here. We've harvested tons and tons of these. They're super good. There's actually a couple kajari in here. You can see I do have a few ripe tomatoes up here. The tomatoes are doing the exact same thing that the melons are doing, except for I actually cut the tomatoes off at the base probably right around 5 days ago. So they know that they have no access to water, no access to nutrition. They're ripening their fruit really fast, and these are usually a lot bigger. These are my Belgian giants. It's like a Belgian, I don't know, medium at this point. See? I actually took my nippers and nipped the tomatoes right off. The tomatoes were starting to look a little bit sick, and they actually were becoming a very great home for a lot of tomato hornworms. And I don't really want to perpetuate the tomato hornworm life cycle if I can help it. So what I did was I just cut the plants off. We're done with tomatoes. We're actually done with beans. I did the same thing over on my bean trellis, which you might have seen in the background when I was harvesting the sweet potatoes. If I can help it, I like to re-amend the beds with things like plants that are just past their prime, any damaged fruit, any fruit that may have a little bit of mold on it that I don't want to eat. That stuff is really great to use as a soil amendment right here. You can have a composting system that is, beside your garden, but there's really nothing wrong with composting your plants in your garden over the winter. So once these beans and the tomatoes dry out completely, they're going to be much easier to take off of the trellis versus when they're green and they've got a lot of life left in them. These I'll just be able to scrape down and add into the bed, and what I plan to do is actually clear out my chicken pen and put chicken manure on top of this and let everything break down over the winter. I like to try to add any hot manures like chicken or quail manures into the garden around October, because by the time it comes to plant this space next spring, our last frost is in April, all of the nitrogens, the hot part of that manure, has been well broken down and won't burn the plants at that point. Really, the only thing green over here is this tromboncino squash that I stuck in here kind of last minute. I wanted to kind of test and see how the pest pressure was going to be on this variety of squash. And I have had a couple of squash bugs, but overall I've been very impressed. I did already harvest one young tromboncino off of this particular plant. It was delicious. Somehow the ones that are in the greenhouse are spectacularly outperforming this one though. Let's go check them out. See that adorable little bee down in there? I am still hand pollinating some of the squash just to make triple sure that they are getting pollinated here in the greenhouse. But those cute little squash bees, I don't even know their technical name, they found their way in here and they are doing their thing. So this is something that I kind of thought of, but I didn't account for properly when I made this trellising system for the tromboncino, is the sheer weight of each one of these squash. And it's actually quite impressive and quite encouraging that you can go from a seed to something like this in the matter of about 6 weeks. And then they'll keep producing until our frost and maybe even beyond because of being in the greenhouse. So to say that I'm thrilled is a massive understatement. I'm pretty sure that we actually hand pollinated the first of the several squash that have been pollinated in this greenhouse last garden tour. Let me show you how huge it is. Check it out. Just look at it. Isn't that fabulous? See how huge they are? So the situation with the tromboncino in the greenhouse is I have them growing up some fiberglass poles that I had laying around the farm, and then they are attached from the fiberglass poles to the purlins, or the support structure of this greenhouse, with tomato twine. I know that the tomato twine is good and strong. Problem with these fiberglass poles is that they are bendy and they are starting to collapse inward from the weight of the plants and the fruit that they're putting on. And these fruit are only going to grow. They grow so rapidly, you guys, I just can't. So what I'm probably gonna have to do, and I'll likely do it off camera, is to attach more tomato twine to a different part of the greenhouse to kind of straighten everything out and keep our squash tunnel accessible underneath. I really don't want it collapsing down on itself. It's gonna make the fruit kind of hard to get to, and honestly it won't look as pretty. I see why a lot of people will use cattle panels when they are dealing with tromboncino squash. I just don't have the funds or really the willingness to do that in the greenhouse right now. These tromboncinos were an experiment this season, and I can say right now that it's been a smashing success. And the last couple times that I've brought you in the greenhouse, I have done one section of clean out, and I've put that on pause this week, mostly because we are actually going to be experiencing high 90s for temperatures the 4th week of September, which our summer actually started in June, which, I mean, that is technically summertime, but I'm talking about hot, high heat index, 115 degree heat indexes in June is very early for us. Usually we don't deal with heat indexes like that until late July, definitely in August, but then by September we're back into decently mild temperatures. I mean, we'll see the 80s, but high 90s, I can't work in the greenhouse when it's that hot. And also it makes me at a little bit less of a rush to get things cleaned out so we can put our fall and winter garden in here, because my fall and winter garden can't handle temperatures like that. So for now, the peppers persist, but they're still doing awesomely, so it's nothing to complain about at all. Yeah, it's 91 in here and it's 11 o'clock in the morning, so. The shade cloth is still on, the fan is running, the vents are wide open, doors are wide open, and it's still 91 in here in September. So I can't add my fall and winter starts in here quite yet. I don't think I can actually pick this up without spilling stuff. It's like when you try to haul your groceries into the house in one trip and you're dropping bags, except for it's the garden edition. I got it, I can do this. So here's actually all of our fall and winter starts that we started right around 1 month ago. They're doing awesomely despite having been sat on by my cat last week. I have them outside right now and kind of trying to babysit them and introduce them into full sun. Now, during tomorrow and the next day, the highs are going to be 95 and 97 without the heat index included. I honestly am going to pull these starts back inside for that temperature. I don't want any of these thinking that it's time to make seed instead of making their beautiful cauliflower florets and things later. So unfortunately, I don't get to put these in the greenhouse or in the garden this week like I had hoped and like I had planned. These little pots are big enough to handle them for a couple more weeks. On that note though, I wanted to show you the difference between some plants that I started in these larger pots versus some plants that I started at the same time in smaller pots. So this here is a cabbage, it's part of the brassica family, and this here is a cauliflower. They should generally be about the same size, but they're not. They were planted at the same time in the same soil. The only difference was this one was actually planted in a much smaller starter pot, and this one was planted in this pot right here. The small cabbage started in a cell tray about this big, and this tray ran out of nutrients. That little cabbage was looking quite sad a few days ago before I repotted it. And it should catch up in no time flat and be perfectly fine to put in the greenhouse and not be stunted. But that's something to consider. If you're noticing your plants have stalled out a little bit, look at the bottom of the pot. See if there are some roots maybe reaching out for some more nutrients. It does not take long for plants to run out of nutrition in a small pot. And what you may need to do in order to buy time with seedlings, especially if it's hot out and you can't put them in the ground, is to water them with fertilizer in the water. Now, you can't give them full strength fertilizer. What you need to do is actually dilute the fertilizer down by half, and that will get them through for another couple weeks. Well, here's an update on the seedlings that we planted in the garden last week. Some of them have succumbed to what's called transplant shock, and a lot of them haven't gotten much bigger for the same reason. Many times when plants are taken out of their pot and their roots are disturbed even just a little bit, it sets them back a little while. They may seem to not grow, but really what's going on is those roots are reaching out underground, and that's what the plant is focusing on. We can't see what the roots are doing underground, but they're doing good work, and eventually that will translate into some upward growth. It just kind of appears to stunt the plant once they're transplanted out. Some plants can even lose a few leaves or turn yellow a little bit, but you should notice that some new healthy growth comes in when it does decide to drop some outer leaves. This is a pretty good example of that. You see this leaf has pretty much given up, and it's got some really nice new leaves in the center there. This plant doesn't need to focus energy on that yellow leaf, so I'm just going to remove it, and it's going to bounce back great. So this was our 20th garden tour, weekly garden tour that we've posted to the channel this 2022 garden season. And I am so proud of the way that this season went. And I'm so grateful that you were here and went through the garden with me and saw the highs, saw the lows, and things are not over yet. However, I am deciding to spread out my garden tours now that we're entering the fall and winter garden. I am still planting a garden. There still will be lots of food coming in, but there's going to be a lot less of it, and it's going to take longer to come to maturity because our days are getting shorter. The days are eventually going to get colder, and with that the plants are just going to be growing slower, so there's not as much to show you week by week. So I'm going to spread out the garden tours to be every 2 weeks. I'm still going to be posting garden content every Tuesday, I guess, until I run out of something to talk about, which probably will be never. So I hope all of that sounds good to you. If you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button because there's a lot happening on this farm.